and welcome back to the Fields of Anfield Road podcast for another episode of Liverpool-based content. I'm, as ever, your host, Andy Davies, and with me today is another returning guest in Tyrese Maynard. Tyrese, how are you?
I'm right, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm all good. And of course, since you came on last on the podcast, you've had a very exciting update via your working situation. You're now, I believe, a content intern. Was that the role at with the Crew Alexandra?
Yeah. So I'm a media intern at Crew Alexandra since we last spoke. I was at a local club, so it's obviously quite a good step up for me to get a bit of experience under my belt.
Absolutely, and that anytime you get to work at a football club, it's always a good opportunity. I remember working at Brighton and Hove Albion. That was an amazing opportunity. So yeah, very happy for you and glad you're getting that sort of opportunity. Now, you came on, of course, last time for our best ever Liverpool 11 episode. We're now here for our worst ever Liverpool 11. So a bit of a different turn to last time, a bit more of a negative sort of approach to Liverpool players, but it might be a lot of fun. You never know, just reminiscing about some old players that maybe we weren't the biggest fans of. So I've once again gone for 4-3-3 formation. How about yourself? What have you gone for formation-wise?
I didn't even think of that, actually. I'll go for, again, the 4-2-4.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And as well, disclaimer, my front three, they're all strikers. They're not wingers, any of them, but I thought they've all got to go in. And also, if it's the worst 11 of all time, then may as well play them out of position and make them even worse. So that's what I've gone for. And my goalie is really a guy that I try to avoid going for guys that, there's players that have, people often see as in these worst 11s that only played about 6 games. And I think, but my goalkeeper is one that he played 7 games for Liverpool. I've got to get him in for many reasons. I've gone for Charles Atonge as my goalkeeper. Played 7 games in all competitions for Liverpool. Of course, he was in goal for 2 very embarrassing games. The one where we almost lost to Havant and Waterlooville in non-league at Anfield. We were 1-0 down and 2-1 down. Won the game eventually, and then he was also in goal for that loss against Barnsley in the FA Cup. I think it was the following round. But the reason I've got him in mainly is because of his actions at the Hillsborough Memorial. Joking and laughing alongside Damien Plessis. Plessis obviously not any sort of way the villain here, but Charles Atonge didn't play a game after that, and quite rightly, because he to be seen joking and laughing on the Hillsborough Memorial at Anfield itself, for me, just that alone puts him in as my goalie. And the worst thing is that he has the cheek to try and say that he doesn't know why he was made a scapegoat and claim that we sort of forced him out because of that reason and made him a scapegoat because of that. And for me, I don't know why he's ever saying that, because quite frankly, the actions were appalling there, and not even to do with that as well. But on the pitch, he wasn't exactly great either. And he was in goal for 2 of our most embarrassing performances of that Rafa Benitez era. So for me, Charles Atonge is a lock in goal. But who have you gone for in goal?
So I've had a little toss-up between 2, but I've gone with Brad Jones. So I think we signed him up. I think it's from Middlesbrough we snapped him up for about 2 million, but I think he was completely out of his depth. He was called upon by Brendan Rodgers a few times. Wasn't really Liverpool standard, I'd say. I know he was never really a starter, but I think, like, you look at us now and we have like Kelleher, for example. There's a difference between not being good enough to start and being good enough to start but can't start, if that makes sense. And I think Brad Jones is arguably one of our worst that we've had. I couldn't really think of anyone else, but I thought in recent memory, Brad Jones is definitely up there as one of our worst goalkeepers.
I think one that I thought of maybe putting in was Adam Bogdan, purely for that Watford game, but I found it hard to put him in based on one game. So I couldn't really think of anyone else really as an honourable mention. But I remember that period when Brad Jones played where Pepe Reina got sent off against Newcastle, Enrique was in goal, and then the next game was against Blackburn, and the following game after that was the FA Cup semi-final. So Donny played, and his whole family came down from Brazil to watch him in preparation for that semi-final. And then he goes to get sent off, and then Brad Jones comes in and gets extreme luck, and really he should have got sent off in that game as well. So I remember that was a interesting period goalkeeper-wise in Liverpool.
Yeah, 100%.
So we talked about so no one else really you could think of. I mean, Carriage you could put in there, but
That's who I was going to say. Yeah,
yeah, it's hard to. I think it's hard to not consider him because he did have that game against Madrid. But I said before, we said it in our last episode that his mistake caused us to go and splash cash on Alisson. So I don't really, I view it as almost not a good thing because he lost the final, and it's embarrassing for him. And I do feel sorry for him. But if he hadn't played that badly, he wouldn't have gone out and got Alisson. So I view him a little bit in a nicer light than maybe others would. But yeah, still.
yeah.
Not a great goalkeeper. Moving on to the back four. So I'll let you go first. Who was your right back?
So I went with John Flanagan, which again I couldn't really think of anyone at right back, but I'd say that he had a good season in 13-14. Obviously, he broke out, and he looked like someone who we very dependable, someone we could rely on in the future. Obviously, he's very young then as well. Brendan Rodgers went, Klopp came in, and he played 9 times for Klopp, and I think Klopp saw enough there. I don't think he would fit Klopp's heavy metal football style. And I think then he went to Rangers after that, and I don't think he kicked on there either. Obviously, he's also had his off-the-pitch problems as well, which doesn't help the situation at all. But, yeah, I just think that he had all the potential in the world to kick on, and he threw it all away due to him not being good enough on the pitch, but also off the pitch.
It was a shame because, I remember when he first broke through was Dalglish, and it was him and Jack Robinson as the fullbacks. And then he had that little bit of period and he came back into the team. And yeah, I remember that goal against Tottenham in the 5-0 or 4-0 at White Hart Lane. I remember there was a period where he looked, they're calling him the Scouse Cafu. And then really since that season ended, didn't really see really much of him again. Really. I don't think we saw him at his best ever again. And obviously, yeah, not the best sort of off the field stuff as well. So yeah, I'm not against that if I'm honest.
Yeah. So in centre back, I've gone with Stephen Corker. Now,
see, I hate this one. I see him mentioned all the time on these things, but he only played 3 or 4 games, and it was that may itself speak volumes. But he did get an assist for that Lallana goal in the Norwich game, which I
he did, yeah. You're not wrong. I just think that Stephen Corker, I don't think it was a signing that needed to be made at all. Not going to go out on a limb and say he was dreadful, but in terms of Liverpool's worst 11, I would have to pitch him. And obviously, he didn't really break into the squad as such. I mean, he was brought on a free, wasn't he? So it's not like it was the most outrageous deal we've ever done, but I don't think it was good enough to be a good signing either. My other centre back, and I do feel quite sorry for him based on the circumstances of when he came in, but I went with Ozan Kabak. Again, another player who in the Bundesliga, he had all the potential in the world. And then obviously Schalke got hit with their financial crisis. And then you saw them drop down and Kabak obviously losing his way there. But we brought him in on loan, obviously, in a period where we had injuries all over the place. I think we had over 30 partnerships at the back, something like that. So I can understand that it's hard for him to come in. But I think, if I remember correctly, his debut against Leicester, where he made that mistake with him and Alisson, obviously a bit of miscommunication led to their goal.
Yeah.
And I think that he didn't really find his way there either. Obviously, then he also got struck with injury, and we ended up coming fourth somehow with Reece Williams and Nat Phillips at the back. But I think it goes to show that obviously them two played with like heart in their sleeves. Like they knew exactly what the assignment was, and they did exactly what they needed to do. Whereas Kabak came in and he sort of couldn't find his way within the squad, and it's a shame really because he was very young still and had all the assets to be a good player. I don't think he just used him very well.
Yeah, I just want to actually, before we go into left back, I just want to give a shout out to Nat Phillips and Reece Williams because they were, I wouldn't say they're the sole reason why, but they had a big part in this making that top 4. I mean, they as you said before, put their hearts on their sleeve. They were warriors, and that sort of helped us towards that late stretch where we got the wins and we got that top 4. And I think, if you'd gone on and won the quadruple, I think you could have played a large part to that and, put that on them. Because, I mean, they had a real big part in us making top 4. And I think that if we had won the Champions League, and that would have made a treble as well if we'd won the Premier League. obviously quadruple as well. I do feel like they would have had a lot more of a what's the word, cult hero status than maybe they do already. So yeah, big shout out to them too. I thought they were both fantastic in what was a difficult time for the club.
Yeah, 100%. And then left back, and again it was a toss up between two. I've gone with Alberto Moreno, but my other option was Paul Konchesky. But I'll get stick with Moreno. So Moreno, obviously, he came in having a good season. I think it was with Villarreal or Sevilla. It was Sevilla before he came to Liverpool, yeah. So he came in and he sort of fitted the criteria of this attacking fullback but that's the problem. He was mainly attacking, no defending at all. I mean, defensively, he's woeful. People going about Trent, but Moreno makes Trent look like a saint, honestly. I mean, every time I think of Moreno, it just casts my head just casts back to that Europa League final where he ultimately dropped a disaster class. And I think that's enough for me just to say, obviously, we were in a bad spell then. Well, we were going in a transition stage, and the best way to kick off a transition stage is with a trophy. Moreno ultimately stopped that happening, and also made us miss out on the one trophy we've not won under Klopp. So obviously, he just wasn't good enough at all. I don't think. Best thing he's probably done for Liverpool was mock United after beating them in the Europa League final. And that says it all, really.
Yeah, he wasn't great, was he? I mean, I remember he started off so well. I mean, that was that Tottenham game where he ran half the length of the pitch and scored. And I thought, wow, we've got a real player here. And then I believe it was the next game where against Man City, or it might have been the game before where he had a bit of a disaster with Dejan Lovren. But yeah, he wasn't great at all. And it seems crazy looking back at it now that he, for 3 or 4 months, was keeping Robbo out the team when Robbo first came. And I find that, and also that injury happened against, might have been Spartak Moscow, where obviously that ultimately never looked back really Robertson after that. But yeah, it seems crazy that he did outlast him for a few months. But yeah, he wasn't great. And yeah, I think, I don't think he's even that good going forward to warrant bad defending. Look at Trent, how good he is going forward. At least he's putting that in. 2 to 4 most assists in any season came from him. But I don't think Moreno was even that good going forward to warrant his bad defending. Now, my back four, a couple of old players. So first, I've gone for Jan Kronkamp as my right back. With 18 appearances. If I'm honest, I don't think he could defend or attack. We mentioned about Moreno and Trent there. I don't think he could do either. I don't know what he could do. I remember thinking at the time, and I was trying to think back when I was going through this team in preparation for this episode, and I was just thinking, what did he actually do? Like, what did he offer Liverpool? He didn't do much going forward. It was terrible defensively. The amount of times he allowed people to get past him and make crosses in was just horrendous. And yeah, it was mad. He's only there from Italy in 2006. He joined second half of the one season. He was gone by the end of the first half of the next. And I think that says it all. But annoyingly, it's like Hodgson as well, who's an honourable mention. Hodgson managed to get himself in the main picture of the Champions League final when Gerrard lifts it in 2005. I remember the following year when Gerrard scores what for me is my favourite ever goal in football ever, the 3-3 equaliser against West Ham in the FA Cup final. He's celebrating with him. I'm thinking, get out of the way. We don't want you there. You don't deserve to be even involved in this game. So yeah, he's my right back. 2 centre backs I've gone for. First, I've gone for Sebastian Coates. Came in from 2011 to 2015. He was a Liverpool player. Did get a couple of goals in 24 appearances. Cost us 7 million, but I thought he was a real donkey, if I'm honest. He was slow and sluggish at the back. There was a little bit of hype around him. I think there was, I don't know whether it was Copa America or whether it was just his time at Sporting Lisbon. Was it then? I think there was definitely a bit of hype around them going into getting him. And then for me, he just wasn't. I don't think he was. I think there's definitely been worse defenders in terms of I think, or maybe not actually thinking about it now, but for me, he was pretty bad. And I just feel like, yeah, he wasn't anywhere near as good as maybe we thought we were getting when he bought him. Not good at all. And this one I've gone for is a guy that is probably more known to a younger audience by his managerial career. I've gone for Mauricio Pellegrino, who of course is more known these days for his manager time at Southampton. Joined second half of the season, 2005. From memory, I think it was. I think he ended up being a guy who played a lot in the league to help Sam Hippier be more fresh for the Champions League. I think that's what it was from my memory. It's a long time ago now. But I remember he was just, and someone you can tell they just passed it. I think the first moment he joined, you could just tell he wasn't up to scratch. I think he was maybe even mid-30s when he joined Liverpool, only there for half a season. Obviously, I believe he knew Rafa quite well from Valencia, and a fun fact, actually, he actually missed a penalty shootout, a penalty in the penalty shootout in the Champions League final for Valencia against Real Madrid a few years earlier. But he just was awful. Again, I think he came too late. He was awful, and that's all I can say, really. I don't think anything else needs explaining, really. And the same thing goes with Paul Konchesky, my left back. For me, the worst player I've seen in Liverpool shirt. I think he's the worst player I've ever seen play for Liverpool. Obviously, had a good career like for Fulham and West Ham and all that, but the fact he was loaned out just 6 months into his move says it all. I remember the mistake against Tottenham, the whole thing with his mum and on Facebook. It was just awful. I think he had one good game. I think he played against Chelsea in that 2-0. He played well then, but apart from that, he was just so bad. Awful. I mean, just really, really bad. I remember I was actually at Anfield when they saw him. We saw the bus come in, and I remember seeing him walking into the players' lounge. And I thought, oh, he's coming to Liverpool. And yeah, he was so bad. I don't think I've seen a worse player play for Liverpool. Anyone sort of else you would think of defensive-wise? Because I thought of players like Philip Dagan, but I think the injuries were a massive factor in that. I mentioned Hossamy, Andre De Sena I thought about, but then I thought, again, he did get a goal. In a week, he got goals against Madrid and Man U. And Man U in that 4-1 at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
The lob over Van der Sar, and he got the goal right at the end against Madrid in the 4-0. So I found it hard to put him in because he gave me couple of good moments. But anyone sort of you thought about in defence that you were sort of considering as an honourable mention, maybe?
No, not really. I think you summed up your lot perfectly. A few of them came in at bad periods, but also just were bad all over, regardless. Sebastian Coates, you mentioned about, he had a bit of hype behind him. I think it was the Copa America, he won Young Player of the Tournament.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. So he came with a bit of traction, and I mean, the only thing I remember was that bicycle kick, really. Well, I don't know if you call it a bicycle, but so it's just one of them where I don't think he kicked on either, and then ultimately ended up back at Sporting Lisbon anyway. So his career sort of took a downward spiral anyway. Well, I say that, but you get the gist. Konchesky, yeah, if I'm correct, he's brought in under who? I think
Roy Hodgson, I believe. Yeah, it was Roy Hodgson. Yeah, it was Roy Hodgson.
And I guess that sums it up perfectly, to be fair. When your manager says you're not too big to be relegated, that says it all at that period. And Konchesky also summed up that period. I think you mentioned he's probably one of the worst players you've seen play for the club. And I can't disagree with you in the slightest. I think he brought absolutely nothing. And I think he was just there to make up numbers, really, to be honest. I don't think there was much more to it.
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing a manager in the team, I think Hodgson would be the obvious choice.
Yeah.
By far the worst manager I've seen manage Liverpool. And I remember actually all his signings were really bad. And apart from Morelos, he signed Joe Cole, who was 2 or 3 years too late in his career. Danny Wilson, who was someone I did think about, but he never played for us really. Milan Jovanovic was there as well. Christian Poulsen, who maybe more on him later on. So some awful signings by Hodgson, and that again, that just sums it up. Actually, one guy I wanted to mention who, I don't think is anywhere near being the worst Liverpool defender, but Dejan Lovren for me was probably the most frustrating player I've seen play for Liverpool, because there was some games you see him play where he would be putting a 7 out of 10 performance, 8 out of 10. Other games you watch him and it's like he's pulling your hair out. I remember, and I always think he cost us potentially. It's all butterfly effect. It may not happen, but that City game we lost 2-1 in the 18-19 season. If we'd won that game, we'd have had 100 points, been beaten, and won a Premier League and Champions League double. Now, I do think that we won the one Champions League. If we hadn't lost the league, I do think that gave us that little bit of after that Leicester game, that gave us that impetus to go for the Champions League. But and Lovren was a big fault for that. I believe it was the Aguero goal. That or the Sane goal, he was massively at fault for. And I think if we'd won that game, then I do. Yeah, that could have been one of that would have been the greatest season in history, because to go invincible and get 100 points is something that, combining the two best seasons ever in Arsenal and Man City, put them together. Yeah, I think I blame Lovren a lot for that. I know he had the Dortmund goals. That sort of, he has got that sort of nostalgia factor, and he sort of has got that sort of moment. It's why I've not put Andy Cowell in my front three, because he had that goal against Everton in the FA Cup semi-final, and I always view that with fond memories. And the same thing with Lovren's goal. But Lovren for me was the player that made me pull my hair out the most by country miles. So I loved him at Southampton when he played that one year. I thought he was really good, and I'd seen him a couple of games in the Champions League for Lyon, and I was really impressed by him. And then he comes to Liverpool for a lot of money as well. Back then, I think it was, I'll say 20, 30 mil or something back then, which is back then a lot of money. But yeah, no, he was not good at all. I mentioned Poulsen. I'll go into my midfield three now. I've gone for Christian Poulsen as my first midfielder, as well as Alberto Aquilani and Salif Diao. Poulsen is up there, one of the worst players I've seen. Again, Hodgson signing, which again says it all. He was so bad. I think he had maybe one good game against Wolves from memory, but he was just horrendous. I mean, he signed for 4.5 mil, not a massive amount of money, but you could tell why. I think Juventus would be sold. I always think if the big club are sending a player to you for that cheap, they can't be that good. That's why I had my things about Grafenberch when he came. I'm thinking, if Bayern are selling him that young, is he that good? And I think Poulsen, he was over the hill anyway. But for me, he was just dreadful. He would just. I don't think if you're a holding midfielder, you've got to be quite commanding. You've got to have that presence about you. You got to. I don't think he had that, and I just think he was so bad. It looked so slow. Looked like he was a 45-year-old playing in one of those charity matches. Didn't look like a professional footballer in my eyes. Awful. Aquilani, mainly because he was the replacement for Xabi Alonso, didn't cut it at all. Again, a lot of money he spent on him. I believe he was about 20 mil. I believe. Again, I need to get my stats right on that. But he was injured a lot as well. And when he did play, he was just not it at all. And again, the comparison was always put with him with Xabi Alonso, because he was bought to replace him. And that was still almost the final nail in the coffin for Rafa Benitez. He signs him. He tried selling Alonso for Gareth Barry, which is crazy. And then after he replaced Alonso with with Alberto Aquilani, and he was just dreadful. And you're expecting, Tina finishes second year before, you expect him to go for a title challenge. Then Alonso leaves. You think, okay, this guy might be good. Aquilani, he might, help us, replace Alonso, but he did not do that in one bit. So for me, he's my second one. And then older player Salif Diao, again, dreadful. He made some signings, dreadful signings that ultimately, he got sacked a year or two later. Rest in peace, by the way. But Salif Diao was dreadful. He was dreadful. And again, same thing as Poulsen. I don't know what he offered. Bruno Giroud was named like the next Zidane, and Salif Diao came in with big reputation as well. And I believe he was part of that Senegal team that did well in the World Cup 2002. Just not up to the mustard. Just again, a bit before my time. I'd have been. Well, not even. I think single-digit numbers age-wise back then. I just remember I didn't watch as many games back then. But I just remember him being absolutely dreadful and not at all living up to the reputation that he came with to Liverpool. But you've gone for a 4-2-4. So, Tyrese, who have you gone for as a midfield two?
So I went with, and this is quite harsh, I went with Arthur.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned before about some players not playing enough. So it's hard to judge him, but Arthur was a weird signing altogether. It was clearly a panic signing because we left it so late to make him. We needed some depth in midfield, and we left it so late to do so, and we ended up with Arthur, who Juventus didn't even want. Sort of like Poulsen, if Juventus are willing to let someone go with a bit of potential, there's probably a reason for that. Obviously, did he make he made one appearance, didn't he, for Liverpool? Arthur did. I'm pretty certain.
I remember that. I think, did he play in that 9-0 against Bournemouth off the bench? That's how bad it is. I can't remember if he even played. That's just.
I'm trying to think.
I'm going to Google it whilst you're talking. I'm going to Google it and see what you played.
That's fine. But I think For a player that came through the Barca, well, not through the Barca ranks, but he was signed by Barca, had good potential, was involved in a swap deal with Pjanic to go the other way and him to go to Juventus. He looked like a promising player, and I think injuries and he just didn't kick on there. So I think us signing him was a pretty silly decision in the grand scheme of things, to be that further reinforced by the fact that he just didn't play for us because he was injured all season. So that's my first midfielder. My second midfielder, in fact, I meant stick with you, Paulson. I think his time at Liverpool basically summed up, the whole Hodgson reign. Didn't really bring much to the table, didn't offer much, and again, like I mentioned with Arthur, if you're getting sold for that cheap from a big club, there's probably a reason for that, and unlucky for us, we have seen the reason why. Again, I think he's probably just there to make up numbers, to be honest, and he just wasn't good enough. But I was going to mention Naby Keita, and that's very controversial. So if anyone's watching this, please don't come at me for this. But I'm pretty sure it's 52 million we signed him for. I don't think there's anything that he did that could justify that price tag. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that game against Man United, I think it was the 5-0 game where he opened the scoring. He would look like the best midfielder I've ever seen in my life. Like, he looked incredible. But with injuries and all sorts, he just doesn't cut it, especially with 52 million. If he was about 20 million, I could justify it. I could say, you know what, it's not too much in this day and age. We can work with that. But I think for the price tag and even the hype around him when he joined, because he came off that incredible season with Leipzig, I thought, this guy could be something special, and ultimately he just was not something special. I'd just like to cast everyone's mind back to that volley in the Champions League final.
Oh, that was dreadful, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that pretty much summed up his time. He scored a few good goals. I remember that goal against Chelsea in the year we won the league. That was an absolute screamer. Couldn't have hit it any better. That volley against Atletico, which was sort of the same style as the Madrid one, and I bet he saw his name in like the limelight and thought, you know what, let's try this in the big stage. And ultimately, that was the worst decision I've ever seen, really. But yeah, that's my sort of special mention.
I want to disagree with that. I think that he's probably, the fact that we waited a year to get him, we signed him, and then he gave him a year back at Leipzig, and he gave number 8. I do get it because the injuries were there. He didn't live up to that price tag. I remember Jamie Redknapp saying he's going to be a star within 4 minutes of him starting on the first game. I think it was against West Ham, that 18-19 season. But I will say, when he was fit and healthy, I thought he was good. I thought he was, when he, obviously that was if and when the same sort of cycle, he'd play a few games, get into the groove, play well, get injured, out on the sidelines, comes back in, a few games to get into it, then he started playing well, injured again. But I think when he was fit and healthy, he was a good player. And I think he fitted that 18-19 team quite well, the system we played. But I get what you're saying because, the money we paid for him and the injuries he had and the amount of times he missed was a lot, I must admit. Go back to Arthur as well. I did find out he played one game for Liverpool and it was in a Champions League game against Napoli.
That was probably the worst game I've ever watched as well. I actually remember that game.
I don't know whether it was the home or away. It might be the home one, to be fair. I don't know whether
it's the home one.
I'm going to get it up now. It might be New Way one. That 4-0 was dreadful. That's the worst. I think that's the worst I saw was in the Klopp. I genuinely think that might be the worst performance in the Klopp. It was the 4-1. In Napoli, that was awful. The one thing that didn't sit right with me was then. Do you remember when we played City and Pep was sort of celebrating in the players' faces, and I think Arthur was like shaking his hand and like laughing and joking about it, which for me was not on. I think you aren't playing any games. Your team's just conceded a goal after should have scored. I think with Salah in that game as well, just before the Grealish counter attack, and he's there laughing and joking about it. That's not cool in my opinion. guys I want to give honourable mention to as well. One was Jay Spearing, which I felt a bit bad for because I don't think he's ever at that quality, but he was dreadful. I remember that FA Cup final performance. He was awful. Had a good start, had a good first 6 months at Dalglish, but the next season he was dreadful.
Yeah.
For the hype, Charlie Adam, I want to put a mention in because the season he had for Blackpool, the 2 seasons he had in the Championship and Premier League, I was really excited. When he got him, I was really excited about getting him, with set pieces and his corners and all that and his free kicks. But yeah, for me, he was someone that you could just tell he wasn't that standard. I think that he looked overweight. He was slow. The amount of times he lost the ball in midfield was dreadful. And yeah, he wasn't really good at all. There's a couple of guys I want to put in, but I think they're done as left midfielders, right midfielders, but I think they could probably go as wingers. So I'll save them for later on. But we are going to head to our attack. So back with you. If you give me your left and right wing of your 4.
Yeah, so firstly, I went with Markovic.
That's actually one of the players I was thinking just then. Actually, that's one of the ones I had in my honourable mention as midfielder, right midfielder. But
signed from, I think it's Partizan Belgrade, if I remember correctly. Had a bunch of people called him the Serbian Messi. I'm pretty sure at one point.
Really? Oh wow!
Maybe I'm making that up. Maybe that's just me in my head, but I'm pretty sure I've heard people call him that. And to be fair, on the ball, he wasn't actually that bad. But for the potential he had beforehand, he came in with a bit of hype to his name. He just wasn't good. He just wasn't it. He obviously couldn't really kick on. His time at Liverpool was very short, and I think that's probably a good reason for that. So I think there's not really too much you can really say about him as such. I do remember, I'm pretty sure he tried a scissor kick. I don't remember if he scored.
Yeah, against Sunderland, hit the bar.
He hit the bar, didn't he? Yeah.
Mm.
And that's probably the highlight of his time at Liverpool. I don't think he was very good in the slightest, and just didn't really fit well with what we have. I think he's back at Partizan Belgrade now, and I think again that goes to show that his time at Liverpool he could have kicked on, but just didn't. Which is a shame really, because he did look like quite an exciting player. For right wing, I'm going to go with a striker. You mentioned before they were that bad, you could probably just stick them out anywhere and they'll still be as bad as they were. And I am going to go with Iago Aspas. Now, that is a bit of a rogue move, I think. There's been a lot worse strikers, but I forgot who we did it against. But again, the highlight of his time at Liverpool is probably passing a corner away. I forgot who it was against.
That was the Chelsea game. The worst corner I've ever seen in my life. And that set up the second goal.
Yeah, so again, he's another player who we signed him quite young, and he looked like he was going to be. Well, I say he looked like he was going to be incredible. He had promise. There was promise there, and he just didn't live up to the expectations. I mean, now he's back at Celta Vigo and he's killing it there. Even for his age now, he's getting on a bit. But just for us, something just didn't click with him, and then I don't think anyone. So I'd be very surprised if anyone can pick out a noticeable moment from his time at Liverpool.
No, I can't think of one. I remember he had a really good preseason. I remember thinking this guy's going to be good, and obviously he started a lot of games at the start because of the Suarez suspension, and I don't think he even got a single league goal. And obviously, looking at his record now for Celta Vigo, 141 league goals in 300 appearances. I mean, he's got a few Spain appearances as well. I remember, he was just dreadful. And I think sometimes some players just don't suit certain leagues, and you see a lot of players come over to the Premier League from Serie A or La Liga, don't do well. They come back and they smash it back in the country they were playing for before. So, yeah, that corner was the worst corner for many reasons I've ever seen, because it set up the goal that killed the game off. And the worst thing about it, it was Torres who almost scored that goal in that game, which would have killed me, seeing Torres, a player I still love to this day, scoring against us in the game that still, for me, despite popular belief, the game that did lose us the league, I'd opened the Palace game, lost us the league at all. I think it was that Chelsea game, and he was a big part of that. I think we could have easily got one more knock cross in or big boot from the back, knock on header, someone gets on it, but that second goal killed it off and really, in a way, killed our season. Now, I'll go through my front three now because you can then go on to your front two. Now, I did have Aspas as an honourable mention. I did because I thought he was someone that didn't do that well. Other players out wide I thought of was Mark Gonzalez. Had a good start against Maccabi Haifa, but didn't do anything. And then Osama Asaidi, the guy that was meant to wow the crowd, according to Rodgers, had 5-star skills on FIFA and didn't do anything. I don't remember even scoring a goal. It was in that awful home kit we had in 2012-13. He was someone I really didn't think was up to the mustard. Now, my front three, all of them are strikers. I think one of them played out wide for his country, that being El Hadji Diouf, as well as Mario Balotelli and Andriy Voronin. Now, I'll start with El Hadji Diouf on the left wing. He's a guy that, again, he had hype. Senegal, I believe he set up the winning goal against France or Senegal in that World Cup. We chose him. Houdet chose him over Anelka, who's done well on loan, and we all know how his career's gone. And I'd much rather Anelka's than Diouf's. Only scored 6 goals in 2 seasons. All of them came in 1 year. Didn't score a single goal in the entire of the 2003-2004 season. The only player in history for Liverpool to wear the number 9 shirt and have more red cards in a season than goals. Unbelievably bad. And obviously, to add to that as well, all his personality was so unlikable. Spitting on fans and other players. Spitting on a Celtic ball boy maybe, a young Celtic fan. He's the only player I've actually hated whilst playing for Liverpool, like physically hated. He slagged off Gerald and Carragher a lot since he's left. Seems very bitter about it as well. Just wasn't. Obviously, he had a good career for Liverpool. Like did well for Rangers, did well for Bolton, but for Liverpool he was dreadful. And again, to wear the number 9 shirt and have no goals and 1 red card in 1 season, dreadful, in my opinion. And just everything about him, off the field, on the field, really disliked him. Probably my least favorite player for Liverpool. I think the worst player for me is Konchesky, but my least favorite player of all time is El Hadji Diouf. Without a doubt, I couldn't stand him. Balotelli is my up-front striker. Again, mentioned about Aquilani replacing Suarez. He was brought in to replace. Aquilani replacing Alonso. Balotelli was brought in to replace Suarez, and £60 million came in after he scored 30 goals in 54 games for AC Milan before joining Liverpool. So we thought, okay, he might do all right. Only scored 4 goals in 1 season in 28 games. Took him until February to get his first goal for Liverpool in the Premier League, and he was just really, really bad and not at all what we thought we were getting. And Andriy Voronin had a good start, scored a few goals at the start, scored a goal in a Champions League qualifier, I believe against Sunderland in the first game or second game of the season. But after that initial month at the club, he was dreadful, really, really bad. And I don't recall him getting that many goals. So for me, Voronin for me was awful. And that is my front three. So Tyrese, who are your front two?
Yeah, so you've named both of them, funny enough. So one of them is Balotelli. He's been a guy who's been known for his rogue attitude and his out there personality. And I just think we don't tend to sign players that really have an attitude problem as such, especially now. Back then, I don't think we even had a policy. I think we just signed whoever, really. And this list of players we've named previously shows that. But I mean, I've read here now. He scored once in 16 Premier League games. As a replacement for Suarez, it is unbelievable. It actually is. Another player who had bags of potential, like at AC Milan, at Inter Milan, at City, he was actually good as well. Obviously, set up the Aguero goal. There's 1 assist in that season.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like his time, especially at City. Obviously, if you remember, he did that Maradona turn out of play. I know it's a pre-season friendly, but Mancini did not like that.
No.
And I think that should have been the alarm bells, because as a professional footballer, you are obliged to be professional. And I think he completely lacked that. Obviously, sort of fireworks in his kitchen, off the field stuff. And I think that reflected his on the field like antics and the stuff he did. I will say though, he loved taking a cold penalty. That run up was beautiful. But
Mm.
apart from that, it's Balotelli's just Balotelli, isn't he? Really.
Do you know what I will say as well? Before we go on to the other striker, do you know he's the only Italian player to win the Premier League? I'll tell you.
Zola didn't win it, no. At
No,
Chelsea.
no. Only what according to my research, he's the only player in history, Italian player, to win the Premier League. Obviously, Mancini's won it as a manager, but as a player, yeah, he's the only Italian to win the Premier League ever. Which I was surprised. I thought it'd be at least some like. Yeah, I'm thinking about who's won the league. I mean, Zola was at Chelsea, didn't win the league there. I mean, who's actually come to the Premier League and done well as an Italian? Not many from memory.
No, you're right. I can't actually think of any off the top of my head. That's a mad stat. Actually, it's very impressive. And to think it came down to the last game of the season as well.
Mm.
So, in hindsight, if he didn't set up that goal and Aguero didn't slot it away, United would have won the league and there would be no Italian to win the Prem at all.
Mm. That'd be crazy. A country that's won, so many, international tournaments. The club level wise, they've won multiple. Like AC Milan's won 6, 7 Champions Leagues. Inter Milan have won a couple, and Juventus are a powerhouse as well. I think no one's won a Premier League from that league. Crazy.
It's mad. I'm trying to think now. Has anyone won? Is that like recent, stat? Or has anyone won one since?
Good question, actually. The article was in. It says here it was 2012. Literally last month. Obviously,
wow.
Ranieri as well, of course, won the Premier League with Leicester, but I just can't think of anyone who's won it. Yeah, at all. Italian, no one. I don't think. I'm trying to think of their current team now. Obviously, Jorginho almost won it with Arsenal last season or the year before last. Should have won it really, the way they bottled that season. No one I can think of at all, because most of them tend to, especially in the 90s and 2000s, the best league or the best teams were often AC Milan and Inter Milan back in that early noughties sort of period, late 90s, when Serie A was king. I'm trying to think even after that, like most of them don't tend to play in the Premier League. Mostly like Verratti, Chiellini, Bonucci, Buffon, who else? Like Totti, Del Rossi, Del Piero. None of them played in the Premier League at all. I can't think of any great Italian that's played in the Premier League, even just played in the Premier League. Vialli played in the Premier League, but not many actually great Italians actually have played in the Premier League.
Yeah, you're right. You
Yeah.
are right, yeah. I mean, a lot of them are like, they love the Serie A. I think the difference between Serie A football and I think Premier League's a bit more faster paced. While Serie A, you see like the big strikers seem to thrive in Serie A because of its I'd say more possession based, calmer football. You see like the likes of Lukaku, he seems to thrive away in Italy, like stuff like that. So I think that's probably a reason why Italians don't tend to come over and do well. But yeah, on to my last striker, well, my last player for that matter, Diouf. You mentioned Diouf before, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, I'd say arguably the worst striker I've seen in a Liverpool shirt. I think, if anything, it looked like he cared more about his appearance and his multiple haircuts than he did actually playing on the pitch. And I think that says a lot. I mean, rocking up with all blonde hair with blonde beard is an outrageous move. And I think he just wasn't good enough. I mean, I'm reading there, at the time it was a club record signing.
Was it?
Yep, that's what I've just read on there now.
That's insane. I didn't realise that. That's
Yeah, well, he came through that. He was in the, what do you call it? Obviously, that Senegal team. And he was good for Senegal. So he clearly has talent. Obviously, you mentioned Bolton being one of the clubs he's played well at. And it shows that he does have a bit of talent to him. But I think he's too egotistical. And I mean, going out on a limb and calling out Carragher and Gerrard is, I'm not going to say a risky move because I don't think anything's going to happen to him from it. But I think it is a bold move to do, especially Gerrard. Carragher, he has his criticisms, fair enough, and his few critics. Gerrard, on the other hand, he hasn't done anything wrong to anyone, really.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I don't know why calling out a club legend who's also been our captain for so long. It's never going to end well, and evidently it didn't. I've also read here that he went through the 03-04 season without scoring a goal. For a striker, that's impressive. I don't think I can name anyone ever that has played a season and not scored, especially as a striker.
Mm.
Um, I mentioned about the club record to not score in a season. It just summed up his time, really. I don't think he's good enough for our club, and I think that's shown.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone I want to give an honourable mention to, again, for the hype around him and how he did before joining us. And I'm fully aware, like Lovren, he wasn't the worst player to play for us. He did get goals. Christian Benteke, I want to put in there because 32, I think he was at that point as well. He was a club record signing at that point. And, you know, I do think if Rodgers had stayed, it may be a different story because he did score a few goals under Rodgers, but didn't fit Klopp's system at all. And just I think for how he was at Villa and how dominant he was as a footballer, even when Rodgers was he didn't have that same sort of presence that he did for Villa. I think it's almost like a sort of going from a big fish in a small pond to being a small fish in a big pond. I think some players don't. I think Grealish is suffering that right now. I think putting him back in a Villa team or I don't know Everton team or someone who's low down the table, I think he would thrive as the main man. But I think just being another guy isn't suiting him. I don't think it's suited Benteke. Not being sort of amongst many other good players. I want to give him a shout out because he got a goal. I think got 12 goals in the season, but his one season at Liverpool, but nowhere near the dominant presence that you saw at Villa before that. But that is both teams complete. So I'm just going to run through a recap of our starting 11. So my team is a 4-3-3 is Charles Atonji in goal, a back four of Jan Kroenkamp, Sebastian Cortez, Richard Pellegrino and Paul Konchesky. Midfield three of Christian Poulsen, Alberto Aquilani and Salif Diao. With the front three of El Hadji Diouf, Mario Balotelli and Andrew Voronin. And then Tyrese's team is a 4-2-4 with Brad Jones in goal, a back four of John Flanagan, Ozan Kabak, Stephen Corker and Alberto Moreno. A midfield two of Arthur Mello and Christian Poulsen, with a front four of Lazar Markovic, Yago Aspas, Mario Balotelli and El Hadji Diouf. So that is the end of our worst ever Liverpool 11 team. So, once again, huge thanks to Tyrese for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for messaging me and getting me involved.
No problem at all. And of course, those who didn't hear the last episode, if you want to follow Tyrese, you can see on our YouTube video his handle there. But for those who want to follow him, it is at TyreseJourno1_. So do give him a follow because he's doing great things, as you mentioned at the start of the episode, in his journalistic career. So do give him a follow to check out his work. But in the meantime, this has been the Fields of Anfield Road podcast. The season is just over a week away. See you guys